how can you create structure in an unstructured life? Because we're all trying to put off the care home for as long as possible, aren't we? So paying into it now through strength, mobility, simple eating that you can continue for the next 20, 30 years is really going to pay itself back.
Is there anything someone should really try and avoid?
Protein gets thrown around quite a lot. Just because it says high protein on the packet doesn't necessarily mean that you need to buy that. There is a myth, sorry, I'm going to get on my soapbox.
No, go for it.
That the bread isn't going to kill you. Carbs are not the enemy. Okay, I want to make that really clear. Like, carbs don't make you fat.
Are there good body weight exercises?
In terms of like what you should be doing, I'd always recommend choosing from 4 different categories. So we have our...
What are some, first of all, key bits of food that they can maybe look at?
I put together a guide that I gave to my team just on this as well. So the first thing I'd always do is prioritize.
Hi Glenn, welcome to the show today. Let's start, like I often do, I suppose, by just getting to know you a little bit. Provide me some context to your life.
Sure. Hi Matt, thanks for having me on. So I'm Glenn.
Pleasure.
And my background is in learning and development, mainly in hospitality. So I've had a bit of a interesting kind of career. Like, I started off glass collecting in hospitality and just fell in love with the business, being around people. Absolutely loved it. Loved it so much that I failed my architecture degree because I was spending too much time in the hospitality industry. And then I went over to Copenhagen, lived out there for a little bit, originally to do architecture, but turns out that I wasn't very good at drawing and didn't enjoy the really detailed part of that. So then fell back into hospitality, bartending, a bit like cocktail with the flair bartending, did a bit of that.
Yeah.
And then when I came back, there was a new bar that had opened called Be at One. I don't know how familiar you might be with that.
Yeah.
Really heavy on the cocktails. And then from there, glass collecting up to trainer, learning and development, like manager for an area, then moved into restaurants for a few years. COVID hit, which is, I'm sure everyone got affected in different ways. For me, I got made redundant. And then from there, I sort of learned to, from there, that's when I studied my CIPD as well, wanted to like learn a bit more. So did a level 7 in that, and then back into restaurants and so on. And then moved to Amazon for like a bit of a different challenge to do learning development there, which is completely different kettle of fish. When you've got 2,500 people and everything is kind of, you're only as good as your last minute sort of thing. And I learned a lot about working in fast paced. Problem was, I was living down in Swindon 4 or 5 days a week, and I live in Leeds. So that was a really difficult time, massive mental toll. Bought a house at the same time as living down there. So that was really stressful. So needed to move out of that. And then I moved into a global L&D role for a hotel brand. So with hotels all around the world. And that was awesome for me to see like different cultures and how learning might affect or, come across differently depending on. In Amsterdam, they have different legislation compared to the US and different cultures and learning. So it's really interesting for me to learn all of that. But just recently, life's kind of thrown another curveball and was made redundant back in March. Starting to think maybe it's me. Lightning happens to strike twice, it seems. And it was a really tough out of the blue, like wasn't expecting it at all. And I've got a baby boy due very soon. So of course my brain is just going, oh, I've got no secure income coming in, and babies are fairly expensive, so I've heard. So I've got all of these worries. And that's what landed me to start my current business called Turner Train. And I've been studying personal training, got my personal training qualification in my previous job, and I've always been drawn to fitness. I've been working out since I was 16 when I was playing rugby pretty poorly, if you ask some of my teammates. So I clearly never made it as a rugby player. But I've always been drawn to the gym and being fit. And despite all of this travel, like around the world and other jobs, I've always been, I've always needed some sort of habit and structure to kind of keep myself sane. I think
Yeah.
you might get it as well. Like when you're traveling all the time, it's really easy to eat crap from service stations, or, you're going out for client meals or wherever it might be. It's client drinks. It's really difficult to kind of stay on top of that.
Yeah.
And I was finding myself kind of burning out from, like, when I first got into that world of just having my car just look like a white van, with like the Sun newspaper and like all these
Yeah.
body wrappers. But I was still working out, and I just wasn't seeing as much kind of improvement from it. So then I started to change the way that I approached it. So I've been interested in it for a while, and I think being made redundant in March was my like kick up the arse that I needed to go, you know what? It's a universe is kind of shouting at you to do this.
Yeah.
So that's why I started the business. And back in like 2022, I started changing my LinkedIn posts from just learning and development to fitness, because I didn't want to kind of be disingenuous. I wanted to be authentic with what I was posting, and found that I was really helping people who were in similar boats, who were traveling around for work, unable to keep healthy. So I started
Yeah.
posting more and more tips about how to work out, how to eat, and we can get into that later. But I found that just a really good outlet. So now that's everything that I'm focusing on. So the business that I have, it focuses mainly on online personal training, because it allows me to just kind of broaden my horizons and, help more people, which is a big passion of mine, from learning, developing, love to see people grow. And it just means that I'm not kind of stuck in the same place, which I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying. The other side of it is I do some leadership consultancy as well. So I'm still doing that kind of L&D side of things. So I've kind of got two branches that I work off with the business. And it's early days, but it seems to be going really well. And I know that I've got a rocky road ahead, but I think everything that I've done has sort of led up to this point. And that sounds quite cheesy to say, but, from doing loads of hen parties where, as a cocktail bartender where you've got to say the same joke over and over again. That's
Yeah.
really good for when you're presenting in front of people, and
Yeah.
then doing years of learning and development, really helpful for instilling habits and how do you create habits in new people and get those to land. So everything like that has really led me to here. And just, I'm now not as scared about having a baby very soon, because I feel like I've got the flexibility to be home and I'm doing something that I love. And I think that's important to show my future son that it's, life career isn't as linear or straightforward as you might think it is, but it's not this whole everything happens for a reason. I kind of believe that, but it's just just keep making momentum and something will happen, and something will fall into place for you. So that was a very deep and philosophical way of telling you like a bit about me and how I've got to where I am.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a great story in there. You said there about the redundancy, and it's happened twice. And there is maybe that argument that sometimes the universe presents us with opportunities to go in a different way and try something else, and it sometimes helps you build up that resilience. And you'll see that. I mean, I've got children, and once your son's born, when they first start to learn to walk or even to crawl, they can't do it at first. And they keep going, but they fail lots, but they keep pushing forward, and everything is a bit of a learning. And like you say, it is cheesy to say it, but actually it's a great metaphor for actually how life often goes, because life isn't linear. I think we often think, everyone talks about the journey, and you think the journey is a straight line, but in fact the journey is all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. I think like one of the best things that I heard, and you can take like snippets from podcasts and, some of them are wildly just ridiculous, but there's a few that have really stuck with me. And one of them was from James Smith, the personal trainer, now like online business coach. And he said that you can spend your whole life climbing up a ladder to find out it's on the wrong wall. It's leaning up the wrong side. And, I'd, for years, I kind of felt indoctrinated almost into this. Okay, like you need to go to uni, which was important. I'm glad that I did that. But then you need to kind of get the corporate ladder. And what I struggled with for a long time was the idea of like the golden handcuffs. I felt
Yeah.
like I was earning more, I was getting more status. We just signed the mortgage on here. My wife works in the public sector, so pay isn't going to be as easy to kind of increase. So I felt this massive, massive pressure of, okay, I need to be progressing up in the career ladder in this way. And I was miserable, to be honest, like living, previous job, I was living away from home kind of 2 to 3 days a week, working in London, having been in Leeds, or it could be as glamorous as it sounds, going to Florence for a couple of weeks, which is lovely, I won't lie, but it means you're away from your family. And
Mhm.
I was feeling quite lonely and I was really struggling mentally with that. I felt like I wasn't doing what my purpose was. So the redundancy, like you say, is like not a linear because I've kind of done this, but it's allowed me to just pursue something else. And I think over time, if you keep up that momentum, you sort of make your own luck. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to sit here like a successful business person just yet and say all these snippets that you can have from podcasts, but that's what I've found is that if you just keep doing something that you enjoy or something that you're passionate about, just bit by bit. Eventually, if you look over those last 10 years, I've had some big downs, but the compound of it is I'm feeling much happier and at a better place than I was, even though I'm not doing that traditional career ladder.
It's quite often, and especially with men, and this is in a recent podcast I had a guest on. We were talking about certainly for men finding a purpose outside of just money and I guess that career, and it is really hard when you're in a job that actually you're earning okay, you've got that status, but actually you don't feel fulfilled, and I think mentally that can be really tough because there is one side of you going, I'm providing, I'm earning, I'm doing well, but actually if you're not happy in it, then sort of what's the point?
100% agree. And I've got friends as well who were earning much more than I was, who had pretty much the same issue. And it's easy to sit here and go, well, you're earning, a friend of mine earning six figures, and he was having a breakdown. Like, I just feel so trapped. And it's easy to sit here and go, oh, it must be easy for you because you have X amount of money in the bank. But it's the same issue, just magnified, it's that salary trap of you buy more, or is it salary creep? Everything else kind of gets more expensive as your salary increases. And yeah, I think it is a big challenge. Like me and my wife had a big discussion about it before all of this, maybe like 10 months ago or so, when I was really unhappy. But it was a case of what can you do next? And I think and I think a lot of guys might be the same, is quite risk averse when you're in that environment because you're comfortable enough. You wouldn't say you're fulfilled or you're happy, 100% happy, but you can bear the pain of, not enjoying that fulfillment just enough because everything else is going okay. And the danger is, and you see it with, I'm thinking of like my dad who didn't really enjoy his job, blinks his eyes and suddenly he's retired and he's just, now thinking, now he's loving his life and he's, quite plodding along his garden and stuff. But, for him, he's like missed out on a lot of your childhood and, for what? For a job that he didn't really enjoy, but just did it because it was comfortable enough. And I think that's been the big realization for me recently. Made redundant in March, your first thought is, holy crap, like, what am I going to do? But the flexibility that I've had since has allowed me to go to these antenatal appointments or be there for my wife when she needs help. Now that she's getting, I'm about to say bigger by the day, but she might be able to hear me. And it's,
But I know what you mean. It's a
my,
a visual indication that actually you're getting closer to having a child. And I mean, just rewinding a little bit, there is that thing that I think a lot of us almost feel scared to voice some of the issues or the pains that we're feeling, because actually from the outside you've got a good job and you're earning good money, and that always was maybe growing up like the goal was to have a job where you earn lots of money, and suddenly you get it and you're unhappy. And I've certainly over the years felt almost I couldn't say anything, or I'd seem ungrateful for my life, because actually other people looking, well, it's all right for you because actually your house is nice and you've got this and you've got that. But internally you're sort of like, this isn't what I want to be doing.
yeah, you're right. And it's not until you get something that makes you like a kick up the arse, whether that's the redundancy or whether that's a, pregnancy or a family illness or something like major that happens that realigns those priorities quite quickly, and I'm very grateful that I've got a couple of really close friends who are both best men to my weddings. I couldn't choose because that just shows you how indecisive I am as a person. That's because they're both great. But between us, we had different stages in our careers, different earnings and different kind of lifestyles, but we're very open with each other about how we're feeling. And, without that, I don't think I would be as kind of level headed about it all. And the worrying thing is, like, a lot of us blokes like don't really have that. We have like surface level relationships a lot of the time. And then when you start to voice, okay, I'm struggling, the easy thing in a lot of those situations can be, well, yeah, look at you, that's fine. Look at your car, look at the house. Whereas you're struggling with this, I should be more, or I could be giving more. And I think until one of those big life changes happens, people will just stay in that for a long time. Of course, this is like sweeping broad brushstroke statements, but it's just from what I've seen from my friends, is that unless you can take that step back or you're forced into making that decision, you can stay there for years and not really hope to accomplish what you want to.
Yeah. And I guess, there's no silver bullet to this, but we do know that actually, and this leads nicely in, it's quite a nice segue, exercise, fitness, things like that can really help your mental well-being and those times when you're feeling tough. But if you're in a job where you're earning quite well, but you're feeling a bit down, and then you're away from your family, you're not eating as well because, like you say, you might be on the road during the day, so you're picking up something from a service station, and then in the evening you're having drinks with a client, and then you're in a hotel, and we've discussed this before, hotel gyms can be pretty ropey at the best. Actually, it becomes a slippery slope where mentally you're not great, and then physically you're starting to go downhill as well.
I see with a lot of my clients is that the demands of the job create this stress, and without that outlet for that stress, it just manifests and grows, and our bodies react to stress physically as well. That's where we start to our cortisol, which is a kind of stress response. It can make it a bit more difficult to lose weight. It's not all down to that, but it certainly is a factor. And that's when you start to just resent your job. You start to kind of take that stress home with you. So something that I work on a lot with my guys is, how can you create structure in an unstructured life? So if you're having to go, okay, tomorrow we need you in whatever city, a lot of people, and it's quite common, I'm not shaming, it's quite easy to then go, you know what, sod it, I'll just write off that day. And that, in terms of eating rubbish, not working out, then you go into the next day, it rolls on, oh no, I've screwed it up, I'm gonna have to start next week with my fitness
Yeah.
journey. Next week becomes next month, etc., etc. So I always try to bring in like realistic, healthy habits, is what I call them. You know, there's a lot of tripe on Instagram and social media at the moment around being completely sober, making sure to eat like perfectly every single day, usually by some 20-year-old baby-faced personal trainer. And I think all that does is just make kind of guys in their 30s and onwards feel a little bit shit about like what they're doing, you know, feel guilty for having the odd beer or glass of wine. And then, and also kind of beating themselves up for, I had a McDonald's because I was on the road so much. Whereas actually, I like to just say, those are going to happen, but how can you fit them into your week so that the net gain over the week is positive? So,
Yeah.
so by that I mean like a concept of balance in the books is really important to me. So if we think about how many calories we need per day, let's say for example it's 2,500 just for ease of maths. You need
Yeah.
2,500 calories based on your kind of maintenance, body, height, weight, age, and you have this dinner tomorrow night that you're having out, whether it's your family, clients, whatever. You can start to reduce your calories from that baseline throughout the week a little more so that you can kind of almost like a bank account,
Yeah. Yeah.
saving a bit more.
Saving for those for the big blowout, saving for the holiday.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So if you know you've got this coming up, and it's something I do all the time as well, is you can just take a little, say it's like 300 calories or 300 pounds every day to then
Yeah.
spend on this day. Now the danger is if you go out and you get fully on it, you have a skin full of beers. The next day you don't want to have porridge and
No.
salads and stuff. You want to have the bacon sarnie and the KFC and whatnot. But if you can snap back into having a healthier day the day after, then you're going to be okay in the long run. And it's just thinking of
Yeah.
how does that look like in 6 months, 6 years time? It's much more sustainable to do it that way. And I think that's something that they've really appreciated because it's not a hard and fast rule of ignore everything that's ultra processed. Because if you're on the road, everything's ultra processed.
Yeah.
But it's just giving enough knowledge to know what are the better choices I can make when I don't have access to a microwave or anything I can cook. So that's been really important to me, and it's really helped me as well. In replying to your like mental health comment, is that it's been the one constant for me. Like wherever I go, it's been my staple. I've had the same breakfast pretty much for the last 7 years. Like it's the overnight oats that I make in a tub. I've taken it through airport security. I've taken it everywhere with me because it's my one way of knowing like that's done. Like I've had a good
Yeah.
breakfast, and that kind of sets me up. And it's just trying to bring in as many of these healthy habits that you can continue to do just keeps you a bit more grounded.
Do you think, one of the reasons that so many people fail from, New Year resolutions, because lots of people make fitness resolutions there and they start those first few days, actually, they eat healthy, 3 meals a day, they go to the gym, things like that. But then what happens is life creeps in and that isn't sustainable. And then before you know it, you've messed up for one day and then it's like, oh, I might as well write off this weekend and so on and so on. Whereas actually, if we were a bit more sustainable, a bit more balanced and understanding that we don't have to be perfect. Humans aren't perfect. Yeah, we make mistakes. And if we can give ourselves permission to do that with regard to our health and fitness, rather than thinking you need to be perfect 24 hours a day, actually it becomes easier.
Yeah, it becomes easier in the long run. Like I'll be honest and say that if you want to lose like a lot of weight quickly, I will dial in every part of your nutrition, and it will be a bit of a slog and it will be difficult and you will look great quickly. But it's only for a certain type of person that that's going to be sustainable afterwards.
Yeah.
So if I was to put you on like a 6 week shred or just something really restrictive, very few people will be able to do that without bouncing back and eating how they were
Yeah.
and continuing that on. But for the majority of people, it's being able to just lose it gradually and then
Yeah.
build in this knowledge that you can do it continuously. So without getting too much into the science, but if we think about that baseline, that 2,500, that's made up of a few things. And in terms of how many calories you need throughout the day. The majority of that, say 70%, is what we call our BMR. This is our basal metabolic rate. You don't need to know that, but call it our BMR, which is basically how
Yeah.
many calories we need just to keep the lights on. So when you're
Okay.
sitting,
Yeah.
if you were to lay in bed all day, that's how many calories you'd need.
Yeah.
And what can sometimes happen is people, especially after New Year's, they restrict themselves so much that they go below that figure, which is really unsustainable. And your body gets used to operating with less calories. So when you start to eat normally, eat more than just a head of lettuce every day, then because your BMR is now a bit lower and it's used to operating with less, when you start to eat what you used to, you're then gaining weight because
Yeah.
your baseline's now changed. So that's where you get the yo-yo phenomenon, where people
Mm.
restrict heavily, eat what they used to, yo-yo, and need to go on another diet, bang, down. And that's why we get that. Whereas if we can say, you know what, you can have a little Mars bar or a bit of chocolate every day, as long as you're in a small restriction, you'll see that your weight will slowly go down. Yes, it won't win you any awards for a 6 week fat loss program, you know,
Yeah.
but you should be able to, over time, create such great habits that you don't need a personal trainer for more than 6 months or so. Unless you have a lot of weight to lose, I think, I'm going to do myself out of a service here, but shouldn't really be needing a personal trainer for longer than a year, because that would mean to me that you haven't done the job properly. You haven't given enough people the knowledge and the ability to do it for themselves. So that's
Mm.
my that's my biggest advice to anyone who wants to kind of start a new fitness regime and healthy eating, particularly after New Year's, is to think, can I do this for the next 12 months? If the answer is no, then you need to reassess what that diet or training plan looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of that is actually, people do work with people long term to have that accountability because actually, we know that there's lots of information out there, and without understanding maybe the science behind it, we all know actually we should eat a little bit healthier, drink a bit more water, get a bit more sleep. We know these things, but having someone there to support you through it and confirm that you're doing well. And I was thinking onto those sort of 6 week shreds and things like that, and I guess you see it quite often with like a movie star getting ready for a role, and they will have a personal trainer, really strict diet, and that's fine because that's literally their job. That's they can control every single meal and what they're doing each day because they're working towards something. That is their job. A lot of people have a job on top of all of this, to fit in the time. We were going to touch on, when people are traveling, what are some, first of all, key bits of food that they can maybe look at, or equally, what should you absolutely try and avoid? And then we'll talk about exercise. Looking at diet, what have you seen in, whether it's the service station or, the local Tesco's Express or whatever, that people can pick up, which is better, and what's terrible?
Sure. Now, before I get into this, this isn't nutritional. Like, you must do this, you must do that, because everyone
No.
has their own requirements, and I don't want someone who's lactose intolerant to start eating stuff because I've suggested it. But it
Yeah.
is all down. Yeah, okay, it is all down to you and your preferences. And I put together a guide that I gave to my team just on this as well. So the first thing I'd always do is prioritize the protein. And that sounds like a gym bro thing to say, but the reason why we want such a high amount of protein is because it keeps us satiated. So if we have a meal that's higher in protein, we won't want to overeat anything else really, and we feel ourselves become a bit fuller quicker. So whatever
Yeah.
you're choosing, whether that's a Tesco meal deal or Shell service station meal deal, whatever, like that's always the first thing I'd go for. looking for something that's high in protein. The next thing I'd be looking at is, can you bulk it up with like high volume, low calorie food? So for that, I mean like big salad bowls. If you go to Tesco, rather than just having the meal deal, if you go to the salad section, you get these big salad bowls, some cooked chicken. You got yourself a chicken salad. Now that sounds really boring, but the point is that you're then filling your stomach with high volume foods that don't actually have a lot of calories in. So say if you're going to a restaurant, you're looking at the menu. I had this the other night. So going to the restaurant, the first thing I'm looking for is, can I get a leanish cut of protein, whether that's fish, chicken, steak, something like that. The next thing I'm looking for is, can I bulk it up with my vegetables and fiber? So fiber is the big one that I think, if you were to show me how much fiber you eat in a day, I can take a good guess at what your health markers are like. Because people who overeat on fiber don't tend to have a super high fatty or super high carb diet. Yes, okay, fiber is carbs, but I mean in terms of ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
So that would be the next thing, is looking for your protein, fill it up with veggies, and then the last little bit should be that, okay, does it come with chips? Does it come with whatever? So then on your plate, you can have a really well thought out meal. And most places will sort of fries for vegetables, if you ask. Sounds a little bit stupid to do, but if you want to lean into it, that's the best thing to do. I always do that. Just yesterday had a lunch out with some clients. I asked for the chicken skewers to have the salad instead of the fries. And I've got a nice high protein meal that filled me up for the afternoon. So that'd be my biggest things would be, look for your protein, try to find those high volume, like weight wise foods that don't have many calories in. Think of like your salads and vegetables. And then you can touch in with like a little bit of like carbs and stuff. It's not the end of the world if you have a chicken salad sandwich. Like the bread isn't going to kill you. Carbs are not the enemy. Okay, I want to make that really clear. Like, carbs don't make you fat, like a lot of people tend to think. But at the same time, if you end up having a crash in the afternoon, it can be because you've had too many carbs at lunch, for example.
Okay.
And sometimes we might want that in the evening because it helps us to sleep a little bit. We might want a slightly higher carb in the evening. My preference is that because I train early in the morning. So it means I still have some energy, and I tend to fall asleep quicker if I've had potatoes and stuff.
Yeah.
As a side note, if you are cooking for yourself, baby potatoes are the best calorie hack in the world. Right? They are. If you try to eat 400 grams of baby potatoes, it's huge, but it's about 300 calories for that amount, compared to chips, where you probably get half or twice as many calories. So it's just something to bear in mind. Baby potatoes for the win. So if you are like eating out in restaurants, try to get baby potatoes if you can. If they are available over chips, if you do want to have some sort of carbs with your meal, that would be a big tip that you won't hear many people say. So yeah,
that's a great one. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's a great one.
So yeah, that'd be my biggest ones. And in terms of, as a bit of a side note, protein gets thrown around quite a lot. Just because it says high protein on the packet doesn't necessarily mean that you need to buy that. It's usually a marketing ploy. So if you have like a high protein bar, that's still got chocolate in. Like, you could still get the same amount of protein from some particular nuts. It could be edamame beans. They're really high in protein. If you wanted to get like one of the protein shakes, fine, but you could probably get the same from a pint of milk. So it's just kind of reading labels and not getting suckered into spending 3 times as much just because it has high protein on it.
Yeah, that's a really key one. I have heard that before, that, it might be high protein, but it might also be high in lots of other things that aren't to your benefit. So they, and I work in marketing, the claim isn't wrong, but it's just leaving a few other little bits out.
Yeah, we're high in protein, but also really high in sugar. Is it is one, particularly like the yogurts. And for me, like I'm not too worried about the sugar content at certain times of the day. But for me personally, but I know that if I was to have that high protein yogurt in the evening, there's going to be so much sugar in that I will struggle to sleep. So it's just worth bearing in mind that sometimes instead of going for the high protein yogurt from certain brands that I won't name, you can go for like Skia, for example, which are a brand I will name because they
Yeah.
have low sugar, low fat, high protein without the rubbish that goes into it.
Is there anything someone should really try and avoid? Yeah, you said the high sugar yogurts. You know, is there things that we see and we think they're good, but they're not?
It's a good question. So when it comes to avoiding, it's again based on your own preferences. And that's why I would never recommend you have to eat this or you have to avoid this. Of course, we all know, right, that anything that's dripping in fat and like our saturated fats and all of that, we want to be avoiding. Like, there's a lot of information out there at the moment about avoiding seed oils. You know, when it comes to like,
Yep.
what our foods are cooked in. There isn't much evidence to really suggest that seed oils are inherently bad. Now, I don't want people to go out and start drinking a liter of the stuff.
Yeah.
Like there are bigger things that we can be worrying about. Like the amount of stress that it's causing you to think, does it have canola oil? Does it have seed oil? Like, and all of this is probably causing you more stress and cortisol raises than just having the seed oil based food in the first place. But yeah, when it comes to like foods to avoid, I tend to say ones that just sound really stupid, but just don't agree with you. I think because we all know what's sort of healthy and what's kind of unhealthy. But for me, it's just making sure if you can keep them low sugar where possible. We have enough sugar in our diet as it is. So just try to avoid those. Ideally, in the perfect world, we'd avoid ultra processed foods, but to an extent, kind of everything is. You know, of course, the breads that you'd get in the chicken salad sandwich example I just gave, they're going to have additives to keep it fresh for as long as possible on the shelves. So it's a toss up of like, do you want to eat something that's kind of had a few preservatives in to keep it going for as long as possible, or do you want to maybe eat something that won't fill you up as much? Like it's because you don't have much choice, you know. So in a perfect world, we'd like to avoid that. As a kind of side note, I know that Tesco's have the sushi deal as well. That's a pretty good thing to be going for as well, because the cuts of protein tend to be a bit leaner, but on the other hand, it can be a bit more expensive. So coming back to what I'd avoid, if you can, excess sugar, you get enough of it. And anything that's kind of not agreeing with you, so don't feel like you need to eat something just because some idiot on a podcast told you to eat it. It's all down to something that's going to agree with you, and if you can, where possible, not ultra processed foods. There is a myth. Sorry, I'm going to get on my soapbox.
No, go for it.
There is a myth around don't eat anything that you can't say the name of the ingredient of. But when we think about bananas and we break down what makes up a banana, I can't pronounce half the stuff in that. Doesn't mean I'm never going to eat a banana again. No. So try not to listen to anyone who shouts at you in supermarkets and social media. It's probably the biggest one that I'd say to avoid. If people are picking up items in the supermarket and telling you this is bad for you, just avoid them. Like, it's probably going to be okay.
There's some great tips. And moving on to fitness, we mentioned about the hotel gyms and things like that. Are there good body weight exercises that you can do if you've just got an area, or even if you're staying in a hotel where there isn't a gym? Should we all be trying to move a bit more, just doing some squats? Is this a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got two kind of answers for this. Is the first one is to do with the exercise itself. It's knowing that it's not going to be perfect. If you don't have the equipment, if bodyweight exercises and bodyweight workouts are good for a period of time, you can build strength but it will just take longer than being able to have, your barbells, dumbbells, machines, etc. So just knowing it's not going to be perfect, it's kind of a mental battle. Me, I
Yeah.
hate doing them, but I know that I need to just to get my body moving. In terms of like what you should be doing, I'd always recommend choosing from 4 different categories. So we have our legs, so your squats, your lunges, choose one of those movements. We then have a push movement. So this can be a push up. It could be, if you do have access to a hotel gym with dumbbells, you can be like a shoulder press. Or if you've got your suitcase with you, it could be a shoulder press with a suitcase. We then have a pull movement. So this is when we're kind of putting it into our body. That can be, again, if you have the dumbbells to pull it in. Resistance bands, by the way, 20 quid from Amazon. You can get a pretty good workout with just those. So they're worth buying if you're always on the road. And the last one is an ab movement. Sit up, tuck up, that kind of stuff. Now, if you choose these exercises, think about 10 to 12 reps for each, maybe more, so 15 reps, and just do that circuit. You can do them either back to back. You can then take a rest on that 5th kind of part and then go back to the start. Something I give my clients is a format called every minute on the minute. So at the start of the first minute, you will do your lower exercise, second minute, your push, and so on. And that just means you get enough rest in between. So yesterday, for example, when I was in a really small, rubbish hotel gym, I did exactly that. Started off with some squats, overhead press, a pull, and some sit-ups. I did that 5 times. It wasn't perfect, but it got it done and got it moving. So that's what I'd recommend. Choose one from each of those categories, and you've got a full body workout. The second
And I guess just
sorry.
doing that is better than doing nothing.
Exactly. Now, for the long-term strength and fitness gains, it will be difficult to do that. You can do it, but it will be a bit more difficult. But if you want to get something done and you want to just feel mentally better because you've had a long travel day the day before, you want to get a bit of sweat on, get your body moving, helps with brain function early in the morning as well. That's what I'd do. 20, 30 minutes and you're ready to attack the day. The second part of that, which I don't think a lot of people talk about, is the mobility side of things. So if you've been sat in a car for a long journey or you've been sat on a plane, you feel that kind of tightness in your lower back and your hip flexors, so the muscles that run down either side of your hip, they can be really tight because they're constantly stuck in this L shape. So one really weird tip that I learned from a guy called Kelly Sarah is to just sit on the floor cross-legged. Bonkers, right? It's such a low-tech one. But if I asked you to sit on the floor for, cross-legged for 30 minutes, do you think you could do it?
I'd probably struggle. I probably haven't done it since primary school.
Exactly. We haven't done it in so long that it feels like such an easy thing to do, but it can be quite difficult. And this isn't without a support on the back either. But it's just being able to sit upright because it's going to help with your posture. It's going to open up those hips and your lower back will thank you for it as well. So weirdly, I've been seen sitting cross-legged in airports on the floor. If I've got a long flight coming up, I do it as soon as before I go to bed in hotels. I do have mobility programs that I help my clients with, more advanced than just sitting on the floor, but it's an easy win. Particularly if we think about, do you struggle to get off the floor playing with your kids? Is it like a mission to get down there? Do you drop something and think, all right, that's it, I'll leave it there for the rest of the day?
Yeah.
So if you can spend more time on the floor, just sitting down, do it whilst you're watching TV, you'll start to find that your lower back, your hips can relax a little bit more than just sitting in a chair all day. So that's something I always recommend people who are traveling a lot in our hotel room, and no one's around to judge you either. So it doesn't matter if you feel like a bit of an idiot sitting on the floor with your feet crossed.
That's brilliant. I mean, we've covered some really good sort of nutrition tips there, but equally some simple bits of exercise that people can do just to improve their life. Mobility is obviously such a key one. It's something I'm mid-40s now and I'm really working on because I'm noticing it is getting harder. I mean, I almost wasn't too bothered, 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, but now it it makes a difference from the fact of mobility affects, what I feel like when I wake up in the morning. Whereas before it was just like, oh, I'm not very flexible. I'm, a bit tight, but actually I think the sooner we can get into mobility, the better for all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, just before lockdown, I started focusing on mobility after I tore my ACL the week before lockdown. So that was a real rapid. Everyone else doing their one run a day, and I was just staring out the window. But I started really getting into it then, because it wasn't just about working on the knee. It was about working on the hip, the ankle, everything that's connected. I went to the extreme of doing like 30 minutes of stretching a day. I was like, nobody has time for this. So then I distilled it down into like a 5-minute. I do use it, give it to all my clients for a warm-up routine, for a morning stretch, for an evening stretch. It's really simple to do. It involves using things like a sofa, just objects around the house. And since then, okay, I can touch my toes, but what does that actually mean? It actually means that I've had less injuries, and I've been training even harder over the last few years. So just paying into that bank account bit by bit by doing a little bit of stretching, it will compound so much by the time you're in your 40s, 50s and beyond. Because we're all trying to put off the care home for as long as possible, aren't we? So paying into it now through strength, mobility, simple eating that you can continue for the next 20, 30 years is really going to pay itself back.
Glenn, thank you so much for your insights today and your knowledge. I've really appreciated chatting to you. Wish you all the best with the future birth of your son, and obviously the future of your business as well. So thank you once again for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.